Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Demystifying Money. We're going to talk about estate planning today, and I am joined by my friend Sherri Montecalvo. She is the owner of Estate Planning with Sherri Montecalvo, located in Providence, Rhode Island. And she's a trusted advisor to her long-standing clients and future generations. She likes to see people through the entire process from document creation, retitling assets, and complete estate and trust administration. I know that some of the things that we're going to talk about today, including succession planning, elder law, probate, special needs, and Medicaid planning, are things that come up with my clients all of the time. And so I thought it would be great to have Sherri on to talk a little bit about the work that she does, how she helps clients, and some of the things that people might want to consider, maybe implementing themselves or putting on their list of to-dos for this year. So thank you so much, Sherri, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my honor and pleasure to be here.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So you've been practicing estate planning for 20 years now, you said. So what inspired you to focus on estate planning, and how has your practice changed over the years?
That's an excellent question. So actually, it came from a very personal standpoint for me, the growth and focus in this practice area. So while I was attending law school, my grandmother was actually in the nursing home. And at that time, my family would come to me and ask me for advice and have questions for me to answer. And unfortunately, as just a law student, I didn't have the go-to resources to answer the specific questions about what happens with respect to estate planning and a family member, a loved one who's declining or needs additional care, and how assets would be affected. And it really resonated with me. And when I graduated from law school, I realized that on a personal and a professional level, that there is such a need for this area where I can serve the communities and help families and take that stress off of them and give them a framework and guidance as to what to potentially expect, and ultimately get the best care for their loved one and protect their assets meanwhile.
Yeah, I think it's such an important area. And I do feel like that is when, people reach out. There is stress, there is confusion, there's often a lot of emotions involved. So I feel like estate planning is something that people think about just when it comes to avoiding probate. But I wanted to talk about maybe demystifying some misconceptions that people have about estate planning, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that you could do along the way to make the whole process so much smoother, so much more, so much easier for families, because all of us are going to have to at some point deal with these types of transitions. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see from people who, maybe talk about or maybe have an idea of what you do, but aren't really sure how it would work for them?
Absolutely. So I would say one of the most common misconceptions that I see in my practice quite often is when a client will say, or a prospective client will say, well, I have a simple will. I should be all set. I'm absolutely protected. And there are many things to uncover and review with that client regarding the process. So a simple will still have to be subject to probate. And I always go back to the very basics so that everyone has a fundamental understanding of what to expect, and then they can make educated decisions. So, the probate process is a court supervised process where we're filing documents with the court and we're getting the assets of that decedent out to the beneficiaries. And generally, there's attorney's fees that are involved, probate fees, there's a creditor period, and the general time frame can last between 12 to 13 months. Which many people are unaware of. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have, frequent or just very quick access to the assets during that time. We have to address creditor period. So I like to start with that premises and then explain other items or estate planning tools that a client can consider. So for example, a simple will just in and of itself will not protect someone in the event of incapacitation. And quite often that may be the case. So you'd want to also, in addition to a will or a trust, have a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney in the event that someone can't make healthcare decisions for themselves, or a financial power of attorney in order to be able to step in their shoes if they can't make financial decisions for themselves. And of course, the HIPAA authorization forms,
Mhm.
they're just as important as well, so that your agents that you nominate underneath your documents can also be able to share in with your medical information. So at first blush, people may seem content with
Mhm.
just a simple will, but once they finally peel over the layers and they understand exactly what would happen if they did pass away or become incapacitated with a simple will, it broadens their horizons to the fact that there are so many other estate planning tools that we can take advantage of and
Mhm.
that are really easy to put in place.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because a lot of people, well, it might think, what do I care? I'll be dead. It's just that, but it's not just that, especially when you're talking about incapacitation or things like that, because it's not just logical where you can, why wouldn't this person be able to access my bank account for me or pay my bills? Or why wouldn't my daughter or my son or my husband? And so I think it's so important for people to really understand all of the all of the things that we could do to make things easier if you do need somebody even temporarily to help you to step in for you. And we are seeing people live longer, and I do feel like there could be, a longer period of time where somebody might not be able to have that full capacity over some of their decisions. And so it's just such an important thing. And then also, yeah, like you mentioned with the probate process, 12 to 13 months can be quite a long time for people who are trying to move forward with their life, their finances, and figure things out. And that's probably an average. I'm sure there are some that could be quite a bit longer. So, such an important thing to mention. Another thing that I hear from people is that they think estate planning is just for people who are like trust fund babies and rich, wealthy people nearing retirement. And I think that that's such a misconception for families, especially people with young children. So, can you talk a little bit about that, misconception of it really only being for the wealthy?
Absolutely. So estate planning is certainly for everyone. Just even at a basic minimum, you would want to have your powers of attorney, like we were just discussing, in place in the event of incapacitation. And then if you do have a young couple or a young parent and we have minor children, you would want to list and nominate the guardian for your children that you have the utmost trust and confidence in. And then you would want to set parameters for those guardians and fiduciaries acting on behalf of your children. And you may want directives in there as to, whether or not the children will have access to extended family members. So all of that advanced planning and taking the time and putting them into, authoritative testamentary documents, a will or a will in conjunction with a trust if we have a minor and we have assets that we want to basically hold in trust for that minor beneficiary. It is so extremely important because essentially, if you don't do that, anyone in the family can come before the probate court and petition to be guardian of your child. And I would say you ask any parent, they would want to have the authority to nominate who they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that people just assume would get worked out, but it doesn't, especially because there could be multiple people who think they would be the right person. There could be a lot of financial assets involved in that. There's so many things that I feel like it's not just that people, when they're stressed and under pressure and also lost a loved one, that they make the best decisions, that they make the smartest logical decision and have a family meeting and figure it out. It is so much more important, I think, for people to decide ahead of time to reduce confusion and pain and suffering because people are already going through so much. But yeah, that's something that I see quite often. And people think that it's going to be so expensive to do some of these things. And I think that financial reasons is one of the ones where they put it off. But I think it seems like, there's lots of different ways that people can think about the costs of this. So in general, for people who are maybe thinking that it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to do this, what are some ways that when you talk to somebody maybe for the first time or for a consultation, that you can kind of scope out what they might need and maybe find a way to pay for it because it is such an important thing to leave undone.
Yes. So what I do, I will walk through the steps with the client and I will tell them ahead of time. I will review with them their family dynamics, their goals and priorities for their estate plan. And then essentially from there, I would be able to propose a plan that I believe would be in their best interest. And we go over everything ahead of time. So I know different offices sometimes do things on flat fee or on an hourly rate fee. My office does it on an hourly rate fee, which is very customary, but everything gets presented to the client. So for example, if they pick the basic will package, they're going to know, okay, that package generally falls within this range so that they can make that comfortable decision and say, yes, that fits within my family's goals, time frame,
Mhm.
and financial budget at the time. With estate planning, sometimes you work so hard to accumulate your assets to protect your family, but it's actually tending to the estate planning matter that is so important. Some people may get the rose-colored glasses when they look and they say, well, I can go through a real estate transaction without a problem because at the end of the day, I am securing an asset. Well, this is actually even more important than that because we're taking all of the assets, everything that you've accumulated, your children, your family, and protecting your legacy.
I want to talk about that a little bit more because you often work with multiple generations in the same family. And I think maintaining that long-term relationship is so important because a lot of wealth is lost when it goes from one generation to the next generation. And I see things all the time about the how the millennials or Gen X or Gen Z will be the most wealthy generation at some point, but not if things aren't done properly. I do think that there is a strategy involved in making sure that wealth is not only, passed down properly retained, because you mentioned a lot of different things like probate fees, there's, like a lot of different things that kind of eat away at that wealth before it's transferred, you know. So, what are some of the ways that you work with people on that long-term basis or involve different generations to make sure that things move smoothly, but also that the money is going where people want it to go and not just to fees and, to other places instead of benefiting their family?
Yes, estate planning can be a deeply personal endeavor, but at the end of the plan, the clients come out with confidence, they come out with relief that everything is taken care of. And for my multi-generational clients, I see many different layers that I work with them. So basically, we're going to put together, a tax saving strategy, and what's the best way to do that, and that may be passing some wealth down over to the children in different, trusts or irrevocable trusts and things of that nature. Then I have many clients that have businesses, and we need to button up all of the details on any type of business succession plan, because we certainly wouldn't want to leave the business just to anyone operating that and leave it to chance. And in addition, we would also want to plan and make sure that all of our business entities, we look at them from tax planning, liability planning, and also avoiding probate as well. And then overall, essentially understanding what is that client's goal? Is it to pass down the wealth to the children? Is it a little bit more so that's more dynasty type provision, or is it to distribute and help them secure or maintain the family business? So all of those elements are all interwoven into one, so it becomes very deeply personal. And I really enjoy the fact that I get to serve as the trusted advisor to my clients because I'm very involved with their lives. They may be acquiring a new business or an asset out of state or even an asset out of the country, and they'll keep me in the loop, and they'll send me an email, and I can let them know right away, yes, we need to take action, we need to make a change to your plan, or no, you're completely fine with leaving assets as is.
Yeah. You just mentioned, clients that have different, properties or, with assets in other countries and other states. And I think that's something that I'm hearing about a lot more from clients these days. Maybe clients are looking to potentially retire in another country, or they want to invest in property or real estate, or they're looking at other countries where they feel like they can maybe have a lower cost of living or an easier retirement. So I'm curious with those clients, how do you help them navigate those complexities? Maybe, before they make that investment would probably be the best time to talk to you. But even, if they come to you after and have, a lot of different things going on that maybe that simple will or what they have is just not enough to protect.
Absolutely right. So we will go through, and it is best to know ahead of time, but if not, and they already have the asset, then we're fine tuning that estate plan. And I often work with colleagues in different countries. So I would always locate a co-counsel in that particular country, and we would work together and make sure that neither one of the estate plans would basically be invalidating the other. And what documents need to be filed in that country, what documents need to be filed in the United States, so that the entire plan is completely comprehensive.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. And I think that having those co-counsels and those other people that you could talk to, because like you said, yeah, the work could be done here or you could get work done there. And then if one completely invalidated the other, then that might not accomplish the goal that the person initially thought when they thought they were doing everything right. So I think that's such a good point for people if you are, or some people who've worked in other countries, can have other assets in other countries. It's such an important piece of the estate plan to think about because there are a lot of different rules and laws and complexities that might just be beyond the scope of what your employer could help you with, or, if you're buying real estate, what that agent could help you with. So super important there and becoming a lot more common. Another thing that I hear a lot of clients talk about, friends, anybody who knows what I do will ask me questions about Medicaid and long-term planning and if they should move assets to their name or take it away from their parents. How do you help people with those types of situations? I know they're sensitive and I know the limits are quite a bit lower than people might understand as far as what people can have for Medicaid. So how do you help people make the right financial and the right legal moves for those situations? Because a lot of times people think they might be doing the right things, but it is a really case by case basis, type of planning. But how do you help people that come to you for that?
Yeah, so when we have the clients come in, since I am also an elder law attorney, meaning that I can advise and assess regarding any type of, Medicaid eligibility, asset accountability, spend down, placement in different facilities. I work with a care coordinator. It's a very comprehensive approach. So I'm able to look at the assets and also talk to the clients and let them know right at first blush, even though they maybe just be considering one type of estate plan. We will talk about and review that in the initial meeting as to whether or not one of their goals and priorities are any type of Medicaid planning. And if that is, then obviously we're looking at the jurisdiction. We look at each and every asset specifically because Medicaid will treat different assets differently. We look at the thresholds. And then from there, we obviously, if I have a situation where it's an advanced planning case, we can recommend a plan that will work best for them and then go over the parameters of that plan, like how to implement that plan going forward. And really, it comes down to what the top priority and goal of that particular client is. I have some clients that are adamant, about protecting their assets for any type of Medicaid planning. And then I have other clients that are completely comfortable understanding that they've accumulated this wealth. And if they need to spend it on their care, that's okay too. And we also, in this assessment, some clients are interested in any type of long-term care planning product. So at that point, we'll bring the professional in, we'll run some numbers, we'll look at, coverages, understanding exactly what the coverage is, what the riders to those particular policies cover in order to see if that, long-term care policy would be in that client's best interest. So we basically uncover all of it so that at the end of the day, the client has a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I think that it's just such an important thing for people to think about. And, obviously planning as far ahead as possible will be very helpful in these situations for sure. So definitely something to have on the radar or, start to have those conversations when you see your family members. I think it's so important and it feels like, maybe they're waiting for you to talk to them, or maybe they have these questions and concerns too. It just takes somebody bringing it up. Even if you say, I listened to a podcast and it made me think about certain things, I think that can be one way to start a conversation with your loved ones about how to plan for these things, because a lot of times we just assume that everybody's probably taking care of it, or dad was always good with money. They probably have it figured out. And a lot of times that's not exactly doesn't end up being the case, but it's too late when people, figure those things out. So very, very important for people to do. I also wanted to talk with you about some of the things that you do professionally. So I know that you're part of the Law Mamas network. So tell me about how building your network and having that collaboration with other professionals, other legal professionals has helped you, and how as a mom you manage running your successful practice while you're helping other parents.
I am a large advocate of, collaborative approach, and I ended up finding the Law Mama organization. And what I like about that is that we are all professional women in estate planning, probate trust administration. It is actually not only national but global, and we're able to share resources amongst each other, ask questions, work with each other as like a referral network. And what's nice about that is, for example, I may have a client which is a Rhode Island resident, but they own property in Texas. This just came up recently. And we needed to retitle the Texas property into the Rhode Island trust in order to avoid probate. So in doing that, I already had someone that I worked with in that area, and I know that she was wonderful and attentive to the client, and I had confidence in, so I was able to bring her in. So having those professional touch bases, I think, is just so important. And I always really enjoy, professional women uplifting and helping other professional women. I think that just serves us all. And as far as, organizing the practice and running the practice with the children, it's something that we all face, and it's nice to have that sounding board as well, because you're trying to not only run the practice, but keep the kids with the school schedules and the sports schedules, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming at times, but it is so rewarding.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love hearing about those networks and things, because a lot of times when we are, when we're solopreneurs or self-employed or in a small business, it's just different than having a lot of different people you can just run into and chat with. So having those connections, especially when that helps your clients too, if they're in other locations where you might not be able to serve them, or you might not have all of the answers, to be able to reach out to other people and not look at things as a competition, and actually, collaboration can be so much more helpful for our clients. So, looking towards the future, how do you see the field of estate planning evolving, especially with, increasing globalization, people thinking about, more maybe, broader, different opportunities. What do you think, as far as changing, changes with estate planning?
Estate planning will always continue to grow as, families are diverse. Obviously, nowadays with technology, and even COVID taught us that, you can essentially be anywhere in the world, and you can start experiencing, other countries. So it really has to evolve to address those priorities of the client. So I would just see situations where, more clients may have different touch bases in different jurisdictions, different companies, different family members all around the country, that we need to make sure we know where they are, and can keep locations on them for as beneficiaries, things of that nature. I really feel as if it's a priority to the client as we continue to grow, then estate planning, as conservative as it is, will eventually catch up and be able to address those needs. Like, for example, even with the digital assets, once the digital assets became a forefront, that was a tool for estate planning attorneys to come in and ensure that proper planning is being done. Understanding the digital assets, understanding how they're held, understanding the policies and procedures, and any passcodes or pass keys or anything that we need to do in order to make sure that if something ever happened to that account owner, those assets could successfully pass on.
Mhm.
So we're constantly learning and evolving in order to make our processes and procedures, better, in order to address all of these issues.
You mentioned technology, and I think that, yeah, the digital assets, that's such an important thing for people to think about, because they might just lump everything together when a lot of these different assets are treated very, very differently. Was curious about your thoughts about some of the online resources that have started popping up for clients to like DIY their own estate plan. And I know that I've always favored working with somebody. I like technology, but also I feel like having a person that you could talk with still has quite a bit of value. But what are some of your thoughts on those changing technologies? And are those right for some people, or is it usually better to consult with somebody in your own state instead?
I always encourage client education.
Mhm.
I'm a very big proponent of that. And I have clients that'll come in and say, I believe I need this, or I've heard some of these keywords. Can you point me to a reliable resource in order to get more information? And I am more than happy to direct them to a solid, reliable resource to help expand their knowledge. Because once they've expanded their knowledge, then they have more confidence in their decisions and their choices. On the other hand, there are some of those tools that may seem quick, easy, private. You may not even have to, go into any particular office. And I have seen those kind of do-it-yourself plans, and people have brought them to me after the fact. What I usually see that are the fault of those plans is that it's not jurisdiction specific at all. It's just completely too general. The next issue I usually find is that there's an execution error in the document. And because estate planning is testamentary, we have a very strict manner of making sure that the documents are witnessed and notarized and everything is initialed. And so that can call into question the validity of the document. And the third other major issue I've seen with that is the retitling aspect. So clients, if they're not working with the one-on-one professional, they may not understand that, yes, I created a trust, for example, but that I have to retitle my assets into the trust in order to make that effective. And they may leave that out. And then they're just completely shocked when they realize that that asset is not governed by the trust because it wasn't properly retitled. So I always make sure that I go over with my clients very detailed process of retitling and also updating beneficiary designations. Because I noticed as well that sometimes can be a foggy area where clients may be under the impression that the will governs that particular asset, but that asset is governed by a beneficiary designation.
Yeah, no, that's something that I see often as well. And you mentioned with the working together with estate planning attorneys is very helpful, especially when I have clients that have built assets, maybe in a brokerage account or some sort of account, and then they create a will and don't understand necessarily that it's not done until we actually change the title and things like that. But once you have a team of people working together, it's usually very smooth to make these changes. But that is that risk that you have if no one is saying, oh, by the way, this also has to be taken to the next step, file properly and things like that. So I definitely, I think it's great though that you focus on education for clients because it is, it is complicated and people do want to do the right thing and they might see these ways that they can maybe save time or save money, but understanding really what the process is about is so important. It usually leads people to make the right decisions. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to find you, follow you, or maybe set up a consultation with you, how can they reach you?
Yes, I would love that. So they can reach me on my website, which is www.estateplanning.sherrimontecalvo.com. And I'm also on all the socials, so LinkedIn and Facebook. And once again, because I do promote client education, I am posting constantly about tidbits, advice, considerations, news bulletins, updates that happen in this area. Because I strictly practice in just this area, it's very important to make sure that we're up to date on any tax advantages, tax changes, probate rules and regulations, Medicaid rules and regulations. So I like to educate the clients through those avenues. So I have LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as well.
Awesome. Well, I will include all of those in the show notes for everyone. I do think this is a really great area to get very educated on. If you have, even if it comes in a small clip or something like that, anything that you can see that can help you either strengthen your knowledge of estate planning or get you to, talk to your lawyer about certain things or reach out to find one that's the right fit for you and your family. Thank you, Sherri, so much for joining me today. And I want to thank everyone else for listening, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.